With the introduction of the movable-type printing press in Europe in 1439, the mass production of printed music parts began. Much of the demand for printed music came from the growing middle class of the Renaissance. For recreation, men, women, and children enjoyed meeting up with friends to sing printed popular tunes and harmonize together, madrigals, carols, and favorite religious hymns. Technology had made it possible for the masses to become musically literate. This shows us that our clef signs were written originally for the various voices of singers. This is the alto clef, one of the 3 C-clefs we are learning about today. The alto clef corresponds to the alto singing voice and puts the note middle C, which is the French do, on the 3rd line of the staff. Today, the alto staff directly pertains to only a couple of orchestral instruments, the alto trombone and the viola, which en français is called the alto. The alto clef is also important for score readers and orchestra conductors and is handy for transposing, a skill we must learn. The tenor clef places the same middle C note, the French do, on the 4th line of the staff and represents the upper registers of the cello and bassoon, also the tenor trombone, and of course the higher adult male voice, which is called the tenor. Like the alto staff, the tenor is also handy when studying orchestral scores as a transposition tool. The 3rd C-clef that we want to learn about is the soprano clef, which puts the middle C note on the 1st line of the staff. In the past, the soprano staff was for the high voices of women and children, called, wait for it, sopranos. Like the alto and tenor clefs, the soprano clef is useful as a transposition tool. More about that later. Not counting chromatic alterations, there are enough lines and spaces on any one staff to write 11 diatonic notes. However, even if we combine, say, the treble and bass staffs together, there are still only enough locations for 22 diatonic notes. So how do we write all these other notes? Ledger lines. To extend the range of any staff, ledger lines may be added. Each added ledger line provides a location for 2 more diatonic notes, either above or below the staff grid. Ledger line notes sound higher or lower than the notes within the staff. Would you like to hear a story about how ledger lines came about? Okay. Once upon a time, there was a great staff of 11 lines and 10 spaces. That, as you can see, was a real headache to read, especially for singers and keyboard players who needed to wear bifocal glasses, which hadn't been invented yet. So one day, someone ripped the great staff down the middle, forming, like the sky above and the earth below, a pair of 5-line staves connected together by vertical lines and a brace. This combination of connected staves was renamed the grand staff. The pair of staves in the grand staff are the treble and bass staff we use today. When needed, a floating ledger line magically appears between the treble and bass staff to function as the middle line of the ancient great staff, which had 11 lines. This special ledger line in the middle became the home of middle C, a note shared by both the treble and bass staves. It was now possible to write down all the notes for all sorts of beautiful music, and the voices and instruments of the orchestra could play happily together forever and ever. Incidentally, the bass clef is an F clef, or clef de fa, because the two dots of the clef straddle the line where the note F is placed. In fact, the two dots actually evolved from the two horizontal lines of the capital letter F. As we learned in another video, the bass staff is for writing all the notes of all the low instruments and voices below middle C. This table introduces the concept of registers. By means of ledger lines and octave transpositions, it is possible to notate all the natural primary tones over a range of 7 octaves. Shown here are the absolute names of the notes according to register. Look closely at the symbols 8VB, 8VA, and 15MA. These are octave transposition symbols and may be added to any note, effectively extending the range of a staff higher or lower by an additional octave or 2. By adding accidentals, secondary tones may be derived from the primary tones in the table in all of the various registers. In the key of C major, the secondary tones are the sharp or flat keys on the piano. Thus, we have the means to put in writing all the musical tones, the grand staff, accidentals, ledger lines, and octave transposition symbols. With a ledger line, it is even possible to write identical notes on any of the 5 clef staves we have studied. Take, for example, the note middle C. There it is in the treble clef, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass clef. To illustrate this idea of identical notes, here is the tune Hot Cross Buns, written as identical notes on each of the 5 clef staves: treble, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. Do you see the ledger lines added to the treble and bass staff? Take your pick of which staff you want to read. These are all the same identical notes. Next time, we introduce concepts pertaining to musical time and discuss how we can write down rhythms and beats. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to receive updates and watch any previous clips you may have missed, because each clip builds upon concepts presented in others. So now, food for thought.